After maybe 20 seconds of tanking, the opponent goes, I'll call. And then we show my pocket kings, and then they show pocket tens. So we're in absolutely great shape. We've got the live run out for you on the vlog.
Hey YouTube.
G'day everyone, welcome back to the vlog. It's currently about 5:30 on a Wednesday afternoon and I'm getting ready to go back to yet another Melbourne poker home game. Not feeling quite 100% physically, in all honesty, a bit tired, but still keen to get some poker hands in and get a vlog out for you guys. So if I don't quite play my A grade level today, I won't be that surprised, but I'm still going to try and push through. Without any further ado, let's get to the game. The session has a pretty healthy mix of 1-3 and 1-3-6 hands. Let's get into the first hand. So we start things off only six-handed, but we are playing 1-3-6 for this first hand, and under the gun goes ahead and open limps. Then the action's on me in the cutoff with Jack-10 of spades. I go ahead and ISO raise it to 25. I think this sizing is a bit too small. Probably should go something like 30 or bigger, and actually some merit to overlimping it as well. In this instance, I made it 25, and then only the under the gun calls. So we go heads up to a flop of 9-7-6 with one spade. The opponent checks it over to me, and in this spot, I think the best play probably is to c-bet. We're going to want to have a lot of checks on this board just because my opponent's going to limp call with a lot of hands that have two pair on this board, and we're never really going to have two pair on this board. We're only going to have over pairs and sets. I will want to bet some of those over pairs and sets, so I want to have bluffs as well. And I actually think Jack-10, because it has a gut shot and like the nut low showdown value we're going to have on this board, does make a really good bluffing hand. So the best play would be to go ahead and c-bet bluff to a large sizing. I decided to check back in game, probably playing a bit too cautious to kick the session off. There you go, two straights into this session. We've already made two mistakes. Let's see if we can kick things up on the turn. The turn is the king of diamonds, so it gives us a double gut shot. The opponent goes ahead and leads 35. If I'm not going to raise with ace king and king queen, probably just going to want to have a lot of flats with those hands on this turn. I'm doing that with those hands. I'm probably going to be better able to represent ace king or ace queen by just calling here with my Jack-10, and obviously we've got great equity in position, so I just decide to call here, and then we're heads up to a river, which is the 8 of hearts. Let's go. We hit the nuts on the river, and then the opponent, they're in the tank probably like 20 seconds or so before they decide to rip it all in for 175. I break my wrist snap calling, and the opponent shows king 10 offsuit. Whew! So we straight overstraighted them first hand of the session, running hot to kick things off. Next hand is also a 1-3-6 and a loose aggressive cutoff, opens it up to 20. Then the action's on my big blind with my second favourite hand in all of poker, pocket kings. I 3-bet it to 80, and the action gets back round to the cutoff, and they tank a little bit before 4-betting it to 220. We're absolutely loving this news here with a hand as strong as pocket kings. Interesting spot whether we want to 4-bet or just trap. I think I would prefer trapping if we were in position and deeper than 550 effective, but the fact we're out of position and we're relatively shallow in the straddle pot, I think it's a slam dunk spot to rip it all in. That's what I do. I shove my stack all in, and then the opponent is in the tank, which is great news. As long as we're not getting snapped off here, we're absolutely stoked. After maybe 20 seconds of tanking, the opponent goes, I'll call. And then we show my pocket kings, and then they show pocket tens, so we're in absolutely great shape. We've got the live run out for you on the vlog. Great start with the jack high flop. 9 of hearts on the turn. Absolutely sick river. They hit the 2-outer and get there with a 10. End up losing a pretty big pot, and thought I was running hot in the first hand. Not so much in this second one. Next hand is just a straight 1-3, and we get an open limp from the low jack. Then I'm on the button with king jack of diamonds. I go ahead and raise it to 25, which I think is a much better sizing in just a 1-3 game without the straddle. So good play this time. I make it 25, and then the low jack calls. So we go heads up to a flop of ace deuce deuce, rainbow with one diamond, and it's the ace of diamonds. So the opponent checks it over to me, and I kind of like c-betting with this combination of king queen specifically, just because we do have a backdoor draw to the nut flush. And I think it's just good spot to invest more money when we do have a high equity hand. I would be checking a lot of my king high hands back though, so I went ahead and made it 15. Then the opponent calls pretty quickly, so we get to see a turn, which is the 9 of clubs. When the opponent checks it over to me this time, we have showdown value with king high, and we didn't turn extra equity with the backdoor flush, so I think it's a good spot to just check it and really try to get to showdown as quick as possible. So that's what I do. And then we see a river, which is the 6 of diamonds. The opponent goes ahead and bets 35. Pretty interesting to spot whether we want to call down with king high or not. I think the fact that I used a pretty small bet size, even in position, on the flop, my opponent could be floating very, very wide. If they're floating with like all of their backdoor flush draws, and they're deciding to bluff with those on this river, we're going to be ahead a lot. For instance, if they have 10-9 of diamonds, clubs, and hearts, then that's 3 combos there, but that's only one of like 10-9 suited. They could have 9-8 suited, king-3 suited, for example. So there's just a lot of hands that they could potentially be using as bluffs. So I do want to defend my range here with a lot of calls. And with this very specific line that we've taken, I think we are going to have a lot of ace-x that we can easily call down with, and then a lot of like pocket eights and stuff like that as well. King high, it is pretty close, it is pretty borderline, but I really do think my opponent is floating the small c-bet really wide, and if they've got an ace, we're happy to pay to see it on the river. So I do throw in my call with king high, and then the opponent announces I have a 6, and I have to tell them it's good. They turn over king 6 offsuit, so yeah, I mean, I was correct that they are floating the flop pretty wide. Unfortunately, that means some of their bets on the river are going to be 4th in value and are going to be good against king high. And after I mucked my hand, the opponent asked me if king high was good, that cheeky bastard. Next hand, we get an open limp from the button and the small blind. Then I'm in the big blind with jack 4 of hearts. I go ahead and open rip my stack here. The thing is, when the opponents go ahead and open limp, they aren't going to have super strong hands they can call with. So I feel like it's a worthwhile investment to risk like 600 to win $6. I'm totally playing. I check it back. So we get to see a free flop, which is 6-5-3 rainbow. The opponents check it to me. It actually would be a good spot to go ahead and lead bluff, just because we can very credibly represent all of the 2 pairs on the board, all of the sets, and all of the straights even, because our range is completely uncapped. So I think this will be a good spot to go ahead and lead bluff. I decided to check it in game, and I do think that's a mistake. In all honesty, we have a range advantage on this board, and we should be capitalizing on it. But I check it to the button, who goes ahead and bets 10. Small blind calls. I kind of like calling in this spot with our open-ended straight draw, backdoor flush draw. Even though the bet size is really large, it's so small relative to the effective stacks. So I go ahead and throw in the call. So we're still 3 ways to a turn, which is the king of hearts, giving us backdoor hearts. Small blind checks it to me. We're not really going to credibly represent a king X hand, but we could overbet or something to try and represent 2 pair. That's a bit dicey though, and I do think like I would have more credibly been able to represent 2 pair or a straight on the flop if I check raised rather than leading this turn. So I do decide to check it, and then the button decides to check back. So we're still 3 ways to a river, which is the king of diamonds. Small blind checks it to me. Now I think we have an interesting spot, whether we want to go for the bluff or not. I really don't think that the small blind has a very strong hand. I think the strongest hand they're going to have here is a 6 with a weak kicker when they don't lead the river. So I think I can bluff them off of that hand pretty easy. The button, I'm a bit more concerned. They can definitely have a few stronger hands like pocket 7s, maybe some king X will check back on the turn. But the thing is, the king on the river blocks them having king X. The other reason I really like bluffing here is we have such low showdown value with only jack high. You know, both of the opponents could have a lot of ace X in their range, which we're an absolute dog to with jack high. So I think it's a good spot to try and realize fold equity by bluffing. But betting into 2 people is kind of why I don't like it. Like, good luck trying to bluff 2 people out of a pot on the river in live poker. Having said that, I go for it anyway. I go ahead and bet 30, and the action's on the button, and they tank maybe like 5 seconds before throwing in the call. Damn it. Then the small blind folds. We show our jack 4, and the opponent shows ace 3. So they called us down with bottom pair. Definitely not a good spot to have gone for it here, and definitely kicking myself that I wasted that $30. Next hand's a 1-3-6, and I'm in the cutoff with pocket queens. I make it 15, then the button calls, as does the big blind, and the action's round to a tight aggressive straddle, who 3-bets it to 75. Action's back on me here, and I think the standard play would to be just to 4-bet it here and try and get all in for 400 effective in a 1-3-6. Having said that though, it is a bit dicier against a tight aggressive opponent specifically. I think they're going to have less 3-bet bluffs. Already concerned I'm behind, even with a hand like pocket queens. So I actually think there might be a lot of merit to just flatting here. The problem with flatting is you're like probably going to go multi-way because at least one of the button or the big blind will call, which kind of sucks because it decreases your equity to win the hand. But I kind of think it might be preferable against stacking off pre-flop against the tight aggressive players 3-bet range in this spot. I didn't decide to flat though. I did decide to mix in the 4-bet, which I don't think is an awful play, by the way. I think flatting is just better. So I went ahead and 4-bet it to 160, then the button and the big blind fold, then the action's back on the under the gun, and they pretty much just shove it all in for 400. Really not loving this situation, but I definitely think they could occasionally be doing this with ace-king, so can't go anywhere. I chuck in the call, then the opponent shows us the bad news. Pocket aces, they've red aces, we've got the live run out there for you. Not great start on 5-high flop, and the turn actually gives them a gut shot to make things even worse. Can't get there on the 9 river, so GG, end up losing another all-in pot pre-flop. Definitely not my hottest running session so far. Next hand, the hijack opens it up to 10, then I'm in the cutoff with king 10 of hearts, and I really think you could do any 3 of the options here, but I go ahead and 3-bet it to 35 because I'm already on tilt this session, and then I get a call from the button, the small blind, and the original raiser. So we go 4 ways to a flop, which is ace queen 9 with 2 hearts, so massive combo draw for us. The action checks the hijack, and they actually decide to lead out for 40. So now the action's on me, and pretty interesting spot. Part of me just wants to raise it up and realize my fold equity, and even if I get called, we have a massive combo draw, so really not that scared about putting more money in the pot. But I think the smarter play is just to call here. I actually think the hijack has a pretty strong range of hands when they lead out here. They're going to have a lot of the 2 pairs on this board. Ace-9 suited, ace-queen offsuit probably, queen-9 suited, pocket 9s. Even ace-king of potential hands they could have, and I really don't think they're going to fold those to a raise. So I would rather just call and try and take my equity in position, and if we induce overcalls from the button and the small blinds, then it's kind of okay when we have so much equity in the hand. And I think that's going to be a more efficient way of us trying to flush over flush someone, since I think the button and the small blind are going to have a lot of hands like 8-7 of hearts, for example. So I just decide to throw in the call here, and then both the button and the small blind do call. So we're still 4 ways to a turn, which is the 4 of diamonds. The action checks to the hijack again, and this time they decide to size up a bit. They go ahead and bet 160. Now the action's on me again, and in this spot, I actually really would hate raising and getting it all in against the villain. I think that they're probably going to snap call me off with all the hands in their range. And like I said, they definitely have 2 pairs and ace-king, so I think it's still a good spot to just call and try and take my equity in position, maybe induce overcalls from worse flush draws. Since the hijack only has about 250 behind, I really think if I get there on the river, even with my flush, I still think they're going to call off with 2 pair or a set. So I decide to throw in the call, and then both the button and small blind fold. So we're heads up to the river. Fingers crossed that we get there. The river, jack of diamonds, let's go. Not only do we get there, but we get there in one of the sneakier ways. So the opponent, they rip it all in for 250. I break my wrist, snap calling, and they end up showing ace-queen offsuit. So our luck's turned around, and we scoop in this massive pot here. Next hand's just a straight 1-3 and the cutoff open limps, then a tight aggressive button opens it up to 12, and I'm in the big blind with pocket 6s, and I make what I think is a pretty uncontroversial decision and just call here, as does the cutoff. So we're 3 ways to a flop of 10-10-10. Alright, so we do flop a full house, albeit a pretty crap one. So I go ahead and check it over to the pre-flop aggressor, as does the cutoff. Button goes ahead and c-bets 15. The action's on me here, and this is a pretty confusing spot actually. I could see going ahead and doing any 3 of the options. I could see just folding here against a tight aggressive opponent, c-betting into 2 people. If they do have a value hand that's basically any full house better than ours, we're already drawing dead. Like, we have to go runner on a quads to even win the hand. And so yeah, we're pretty much dead already. I could see just exploit folding for that reason. But we're ahead of all their c-bet bluffs. Ace-queen, king-queen, jack-9 suited, stuff like that we're ahead of, and folding out our equity will be a mistake against those hands, and somewhat possible that they're protection betting a worse full house, like pocket 5s. So I do decide to throw in the call. There might even be merit to check raising just to try and deny equity to their c-bet bluffs, but that's not what I did. I threw in the call, and then the cutoff folds. So we're heads up to a turn, which is the jack of hearts. I go ahead and check it over to the aggressor. This is a pretty bad turn for us. It gives some of their c-bet bluffs a better full house than us now. So I go ahead and check it over to the opponent, and then they check back, which is really good news for us. I think their range is going to have a lot of ace-high hands once they do check back the turn. This is going to be a great turn for them to keep betting with their stronger full houses than us. Maybe they're going to have some stuff like pocket 10s and pocket 9s that, worried about the jacks. They'll check that back, but I think it's going to be a lot of ace-high hands we're against. So we get to see a free river, which is the jack of diamonds, putting a full house on the board, so we get completely counterfeit here. But now my mind starts to tick over. If I think my opponent's range has a lot of ace-high hands and has a lot of hands like pocket sevens through pocket nines, this is actually a really good spot to bluff to try and put them off of a chop. Having called out of the big blind, I think we have a few more 10x and jack-x combinations than the opponent does, specifically when they check back the turn. So I think it's a really good spot to try and bluff them off of a chop. So I go ahead and bet 50, and then my opponent hits the tank for probably like 30 seconds before throwing in the call. And I figure we're chopping, I show my pocket sixes, and then the opponent shows pocket aces. So they weren't actually playing the board like I thought. They did mix in a strong check back on the turn with a hand like aces, which turns out was actually a pretty good play by them, because I'm just going to check fold the turn if they continue to bet. So it's a good spot for them to induce a bluff from me. It paid off for them, so well done to them. Unfortunately, I got outplayed on this one. Next hand is just another straight 1-3, and then under the gun goes ahead and open limps, and I'm in the cutoff with queen 10 of diamonds. I go ahead and raise it up to 20, then I get a call from the cutoff and the original limper. So we go three ways to a flop of ace king jack with two hearts. It's a pretty good flop, so the action checks to me. Definitely going to go ahead and c-bet the nuts here. I make it 25, small blind folds, and under the gun calls. So we're heads up to the turn, which is a 6 of diamonds, very safe turn for us. The opponent checks it over to me. As you can see there, they started off the hand with only 200, so they got 165 left in their stack. The pot's already 113. I think this is a good spot to go ahead and rip it all in for value. I really don't think my opponent's going to have a lot of elasticity with a hand that's ace-x or a diamond draw. Like maybe sometimes they'll call it, 60 with a diamond draw that they'll fold to an all-in, but I really think they're going to call it off most of the time. I mean, sometimes my opponent will fold a heart draw to all in that they would have called for 60, but a lot of their heart draws are going to have combo draws, and they're going to have so many ace-x hands that I really think they're just going to call off the shove about as often as they would call a smaller bet of like 60 or so. So I decide to go for it. I rip it all in, and then my opponent is in the tank maybe like 10 seconds before mucking their hand. Damn. So I wonder if we did lose value by ripping it for so much, but I guess we'll never know. But we do take this pot in, whatever the case. We got one final hand before we wrap this thing up, and it's another straight 1-3. So the action's on the same short stack play from the previous hand, and they open limp the hijack. Then the button goes ahead and raises it to 15. I'm in the small blind with pocket nines. I decide to 3-bet it to 60. This is a standard 3-bet, small blind versus button, even against a tighter button range that is raising over a limper. I think if we have pocket eights, I would definitely consider folding that hand more so, but nine's slam dunk spot. I make it 60, then the hijack actually decides to call the 3-bet. So usually when people limp call a 3-bet, I'm pretty worried that it's a tight range of hands, but honestly, having played with this opponent for about an hour now, I'm not really worried about their range at all. I think they'll be doing this with like ace-2 offsuit, pocket threes, stuff like that, so really not concerned about their range. What I am more concerned about is when the action gets back to the button and they decide to rip it all in for 235. Pretty gross spot for us with nines here. I'm really not sure what the best play here is, because I think with the dynamic that the hijack probably just has 2 Uno cards in their hand, it would make sense for the button to be shoving a pretty wide range here to try and isolate that range of hands and push me out of the pot. So even with a hand like pocket sixes or ace-9 suited, that would actually make a pretty good shove to try and push me out of the pot. And if that's the case and they are shoving with that range of hands, we definitely have enough equity to call the all-in with pocket nines, particularly with the overlay of the hijack. Kind of tempted to call for that reason, but we are playing live poker and people tend to be tighter with their 4-bet ranges. So if they are shoving something like 10s plus, ace-queen plus, then we're a massive dog to that range and absolutely should be folding. Comes down to what you think the dynamics of the situation are. Where do you think the button's head's at in this dynamic? And I am not really sure, so I'm in the tank probably like 30 seconds, but eventually I'll come to the conclusion. We're playing a game with incomplete information. The button might have as much knowledge on me as to what the hijack's range is, so I really should be defending my range and not giving EV up to them in case they do show up with like pocket sixes here. So I throw in the call, and then the hijack just shrugs and calls off for the 40 that was remaining in their stack. Button shows us pocket queens. Pretty gross to see that hand. And then the Hijack shows 10-9 offsuit, which is kind of the nut low hand for them to show because they block our outs. But regardless, we're 3 ways to a flop. The window cards, the 9 of spades, let's go. We hit the 1 outer to crack queens. We actually flop a full house, so 10-9's pretty much dead as well. Queens don't get there on the rest of the run out. Let's go. I know I didn't run as well in the all-in pots earlier in the sessions, but I definitely can't talk about that now because we wrap this session up, dish and bad beats out to everyone. So there you go, those were the most interesting hands I played across the session. But in terms of how I feel about my play and my gameplay grade, I'm going to go with a B for this session. I do like most of the plays I made in this session, but there were a few mistakes in there. I think when I bluffed the river with Jack 4 of hearts, that was a pretty bad play, and I also missed the opportunity to like bet out on the flop when it would have been a good board for me. Also didn't c-bet the Jack 10 suited for the very first hand of the session, so I really do feel like sort of misreading flops and playing them poorly specifically, so there's definitely lots of room to improve there. Also, when I bluffed with the pocket sixes on the river, that definitely wasn't a tilt play. It was something I thought made a lot of logical sense. My opponent just kind of owned me by having a protected check back range on the turn. And then the pocket nines hand where I called off the very final one. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to fall into the confirmation bias trap, but at the same time, they did have queens. Maybe that range of hands is pretty strong that they're 4-bet ripping it with, so we don't really know, but definitely going to keep that in mind for the next time I'm in a similar spot like that. As always, hop in the comments below. Let me know if you think I made other mistakes during the session, but I really think those were potentially the main ones, and the rest of the hands I'm pretty happy with my play, so don't want to go downgrade myself too much, but those mistakes are there. I acknowledge them, and they're going to drag my play down a bit for sure. So ended up landing on a B for this session. For results on this session, I did end up buying into the game for 2,000 after having to top up after getting stacked a few times, and ended up cashing out for 1,230. So pretty big loss on the session. Of course, I ran bad in those all-in pots, but definitely a few mistakes that contributed to this much of a loss. But like I said in my gameplay grade, I can't be kicking myself too much when largely it was just due to run bad. That's just poker sometimes, name of the game. Okay, so it's about 2 a.m. at the moment and the game just broke, so I only got to play about 6.5 hours tonight. I was very concerned that me not feeling 100% would impact my play, and whilst I still don't feel quite at 100%, I don't know if my play was affected as much as I was concerned it would be. There was some mistakes I made, but definitely could have been worse, and honestly I was anticipating it was worse. Definitely ran pretty poor across the session, so I got to take it for what it is. Right now, I'm keen to go home because I'm just going to edit vlogs when I do get home. We finished a bit earlier, so I've still got a few more hours where I can be productive this morning. So I'm going to go do that now. I'm out of here. Peace.